ever heard the term railroading fabric or railroading wallpaper? Hi everyone, it's Carol from Discover Interior Design and I'm so glad you're here. In this video, I'm going to share with you what that term railroading means and how it relates to the placement of wallpaper and fabric. And to let you know, when would be examples of when you may want to consider railroading your fabric or wallpaper. So let's get started. So what is railroading? Well, railroading has to do with changing the placement, the natural direction of how you would place, say, a wallpaper or fabric. Because normally in a fabric or a wallpaper, we roll out the fabric or the wallpaper in a vertical direction, from top to bottom. But when you railroad a fabric or wallpaper, that means you pivot it 90 degrees where you would be placing that in a horizontal direction, so from left to right. So say you had a fabric or wallpaper with stripes on it, and those stripes are off of that wallpaper or fabric in a vertical direction from top to bottom. But if you pivot it and railroad it, then those stripes would run horizontally. And I think probably it's called railroading just because we can think of railroad tracks, running horizontally from left to right. So railroading a fabric or a wallpaper is a decision on our part to decide that we want to change the direction, especially if there's a pattern on there, if we want to change the direction of that pattern. But sometimes wallpaper or fabric will say on their label that it's already railroaded, meaning that maybe the traditional way of having a stripe from top to bottom, they've already changed it to a horizontal position. So we don't have to railroad it. So why would you want to think about railroading a fabric or wallpaper? Well, there are a couple of reasons why. One would be, say you are upholstering a sofa, and a sofa is a very wide piece of furniture. And if you railroad that fabric, then that way there are no seams in the construction of the sofa. If you use that fabric in the traditional sense, from top to bottom, there may be some seamings in the cushions or in the back cushions. So if you have something that's kind of wide, it may make sense to run that fabric in a railroad direction. And then another example would be if you're using a fabric that has a pile on it. So there's a raised surface, and the nap, which is that raised surface, has a certain direction that it runs when it's smooth and laying flat. And you may want to think about running that fabric in a railroaded direction. Say you were going to cover a chair, and you'd want to know what direction that nap runs, because you would probably want that nap to be smooth for the most part and running in the same direction all over the different areas of that chair. So maybe you need to turn the fabric, pivot the fabric, roll, and run it in a railroaded direction just so that the nap is smooth and flat and makes sense with that chair. And then another example of where you may want to railroad a fabric or wallpaper is when you want to change the direction of natural lines that are happening in a room or on a piece of furniture or on furnishings. And when we're talking about lines, I am referring to actual lines that we may see, say, in a pattern, stripes, or lines that happen in a room or on a piece of furniture. And line has to do with the direction of where our eye is going. And line helps us move our eyes in a specific direction. And line is one of the design elements that we use to help create a certain look and feel to a room. So examples of this would be a striped wallpaper, and there are actual lines on there making those stripes. And those stripes, depending on which way they are going, will help our eyes move in a certain direction. So if we hang a wallpaper with stripes on it in a vertical way where those stripes are going from top to bottom, that is leading our eyes in a very vertical direction, vertical lines. But if we place that wallpaper in a horizontal manner where the lines are moving in a horizontal direction from left to right, well, that's creating movement in a more horizontal line or a more horizontal fashion. So when we want to change the direction of some natural lines that are happening in a room, whether that's a room that has very vertical lines, it's a very tall room, or a sofa that has very horizontal lines, that's where we can think about using railroading and railroading a fabric or a wallpaper, and especially a fabric or wallpaper that has a pattern on it, to help us accentuate those lines or de-emphasize those natural lines that are happening. But not all patterns would make sense for us to change the direction and railroad them. An overall pattern has no direction. So that really wouldn't make a difference, because it wouldn't make a difference if we hung it the traditional way or railroaded it. And then there are patterns that are set up in a very specific direction. We wouldn't want to railroad this toile fabric or wallpaper because it just wouldn't make sense with everything being upside down and kind of wonky. But if we are using a wallpaper that has a definite direction to it, but that it can be changed, then that's where we can railroad it to help us create the look and feel that we're going for. And so good examples of that would be stripes, where we could use a stripe vertically or horizontally. Or what about other geometric shapes or natural shapes, or even things like wood-grained wallpaper? So any pattern that has a motif, which is just a design that is repeated throughout that pattern, that can be looked at in different directions, would be a good example of where we could railroad that without ruining what that pattern looks and feels like. So one example of where we could use railroading to help us to either accentuate and emphasize the natural lines that are happening in a room or in a piece of furniture, or to de-emphasize that and change things up, could be in a hallway. So maybe you bought this really neat zigzag wallpaper, but those zigzag stripes are in a vertical fashion, from top to bottom, and you would like to change it up. So you could railroad that wallpaper so those zigzag stripes run horizontally instead of vertically. Or what about a room where you have taller ceilings and you want to kind of break that up a little bit? So maybe that's where you'd railroad a striped fabric that is naturally in a vertical form where it's running from top to bottom, but you would railroad it so that it provides horizontal lines to help break up the verticalness and height of that space. Or what about in a bedroom and the bedding that you're using? Maybe you have a cute pillow that has a natural horizontal shape to it. It's kind of this wide and low pillow. Well, maybe you want to emphasize that and place the fabric in a horizontal manner. And so maybe you saw this great striped fabric, but it's vertical, but maybe you can turn it and railroad it so that those horizontal stripes replicate or repeat, that long, wide, horizontal nature of that pillow. Or even in bedding, if you're using stripes, you can either emphasize, how deep that bed is by placing those stripes in a vertical way, or maybe emphasize or de-emphasize the longness of the bed and emphasize maybe the width of the bed by placing those stripes in a horizontal manner. And so maybe one or the other, you would be railroading that fabric to create that effect. When you want to de-emphasize or accentuate some natural lines that are going on in a room or on furnishings, that's where you can use the pattern on a fabric or wallpaper and railroad it to help you create the look and feel that you're going for. So I'd love to find out from you if you have any other ideas of where we may want to place the fabric or wallpaper in a railroaded fashion. And also, if you have used that before in your home when you were reupholstering something or hanging curtains. So please share your design ideas and suggestions in the comments. Thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.